guys, and welcome back to the Cruel Corner. We're here once again in this wonderful ranty corner for all things Formula E. So the first round at Misano has come to a close, and what could be said, it was the usual peloton-style racing once again that the Gen 3 era has become so accustomed to in Formula E, but it all got a little bit crackers and a little bit crazy in certain parts of the race, but for the most part, once the pack decided, yep, we're up and running and we're going, sort of calmed down a little bit, didn't it? It did calm down just a touch. It was still some good overtakes and battles, but once that pace was unleashed, it meant that there wasn't much overtaking afterwards, but some good results up and down the field for certain teams and drivers, and some penalties that we'll come to in due course, of course. So if you've never seen this series before, I award the drivers out a maximum of 10 points based on their overall race weekend's performance, and I go all the way down to 0 if they have a particularly bad one. Take a look out for bonus points though. They're sometimes off some drivers that do something extra special during a race, and on the very rare occasion I do award minus points to those drivers that do something extra special, but for all the wrong reasons. Let's take a look at the current Cruel Corner standings then going into this episode. It's on the screen now for you to take a look at and have a look and see where your favourite driver is. And based on how they went in Misano round number 1, don't forget, just the first time around, do you see them drivers going up? Do you see them going down? It's all to play for at the top. To be honest, all of it is quite close, to be honest. I think one good race here and there, even for drivers in the lower half of the pack, it could bring them right back up there. So this championship really is just as chaotic as Formula E in real life. So without further ado then, let's kick things off with the race winner then, shall we? Of course it was, at long last, it's Ollie Rowland, taking his second career win in Formula E, the first ever Formula E victory for the Nissan squad as well. And it was just a shame that they had to celebrate P2 and then of course be updated into P1 and take the overall win after an unfortunate disqualification, which we'll talk about later on in the video, of course. But for now, we're talking about Ollie Rowland, and what a fantastic season he has had and continues to have. 4 races in a row on the podium, and fourth time of asking, it turns into a victory. Fantastic. He's having an absolutely fantastic season. I know I've said it in previous videos as well, but from where he was last season to where he is now, it's worlds apart, isn't it? It takes the lead of the standings as well by 9 points. He's got 80 points now. It's just fantastic, isn't it? Really good to see how well Ollie Rowland is doing this season. And I'm sure it's going to be more of the same in tomorrow's race as well. You know, if he gets a good qualifying again, it can easily be inside the top 5, be inside the top 3, maybe even take another victory as well. Who knows? But for now, it's been a fantastic race for him overall. And I can't really do any less than give him a perfect 10, can I? I can't. I really can't. It's a perfect 10 to Ollie Rowland, but I'm going to do something a little bit different. It's going to be 12. I'm giving him 12 points. 12 points to Ollie Rowland. Simply for the fact, because of how well he has been doing this season, he deserves those bonus points. That Nissan car, we didn't think it was going to be anything spectacular this year, I'm sure you'll all admit. You look at Nissan and you think, yeah, solid point scoring car that at every round. But what he's doing with it is extraordinary. I'm going to say it like that because that's how good it is. Ollie Rowland has been doing fantastic this season, and this weekend is no exception to that. Doing a stunning job, a solid qualifying, gets himself into the gaggle well. But when it's the peloton-style racing, it doesn't get involved in any silly dramas or incidents or accidents. He keeps himself clean, he lets other people overtake him, but he crucially overtakes when he knows it's the right time for him, does it safely, does it cleanly, gets through the pack, gets into the lead of the race, although this time, of course, he was running in P2. He did lead for some part of it and then settled for second. And then as the race literally came to his way after the flag fell, several hours later, but nonetheless, he put himself in that position and put himself in that opportunity to get a solid podium finish that became a victory. Fantastic to Ollie Rowland, no matter what your thoughts are on the disqualification. It's not Nissan's fault, it's not Oliver Rowland's fault. He's been impeccable this weekend so far. He's been impeccable this season so far as well. And it's 12 points to Ollie Rowland for that. A stunning job. And long may it continue into tomorrow's race as well. Fingers crossed for you, Ollie. I'm rooting for you. In second place, inheriting second place, and even inheriting a spot on the podium, we come to Jake Dennis, of course, in the Andretti. Once again back on the podium, so he crossed the line in P4, was inherited to P3 due to a 5-second time penalty for another driver, which we'll come to shortly, and then was quite happy with third and thought, oh, bloody hell, yeah, I'm on the podium, let's spray the bubbly. And then again, like Ollie Rowland, got a phone call several hours later and said, oh yeah, your other competitor's been disqualified, you're now second. So yeah, he gains 2 places from all the Formula E fiasco, shall we say. And again, Jake Dennis, even crossing the line in P4, it's still a solid effort from where he qualified because he was struggling with understeer all weekend long so far. So I hope for tomorrow's race they can sort that out. But he just wasn't comfortable. He qualified himself in 19th, was it? But ended up starting 17th because of penalties. Something daft like that anyway. I know he obviously gained from Jake Hughes' disqualification from qualifying. Again, we'll come to that in a minute. It's one of them weekends for Formula E so far, isn't it? I hope it doesn't happen tomorrow. But for now, it's a bit of BS, isn't it? But yeah, so... started anyway well down the field, well outside the points. But when it got to the gaggles phases and everyone was like bunching and gaggling up, you're like, oh bloody hell, look at Jake Dennis, he's 8th. Oh, and then we'll cut to a replay, then he's back and he's 5th. I don't know how I'm going to ever manage to actually monitor everyone's race and how they went on without somehow managing to get all their full on boards and watch all of their race in their entirety, because it's absolutely mental. But Jake Dennis was in and around the top 5 from the early onset, really. He made a lot of places at the start when everyone was really running slow. And to prove how slow they were going, they were running about 8.5 seconds a lap slower in lap time than they did in qualifying. So yeah, qualifying you get a bit of extra power boost, but you're not that slow. And of course, during the race, eventually when the gaggle released, then they were running 6.5 seconds faster than what they had been doing previously. So just shows you how much regen they were trying to power save, you know. But for Jake Dennis, again, he did exactly what Rowland did, except he carved his way up through the field. Stayed in a safe position, made sure he wasn't vulnerable, and then when he was ready to charge, he charged. And crossing the line P4, he was going to get the score I've given, but then it gets inherited to second. So yeah, fair play for him for that. Again, whatever you think of the penalties, it's not Jake Dennis's fault, it's not Andretti's fault, but Jake Dennis put himself in an opportunity to get a podium, and he's got just that. So for Jake Dennis, it's 9 points this weekend for him so far for the round 1 race at Misano. And yeah, overall, a solid job by him, a solid job by Andretti. It seems that they overcame what problems they had in free practice and in qualifying to be able to deliver him a solid race car and for them to have the right strategy of when to attack, when not to attack, and when to overtake and when to settle back in, because it all played out beautifully for Jake Dennis. 9 points to him. Finishing on the podium, inheriting the podium as well, of course, after finishing 5th, then elevated himself to 4th, then getting a disqualification phone call later on in the day. Is here in 3rd, it's Maxi Gunt in the Maserati. He can do no wrong, can he, Maxi Gunt? Another stunning effort by him in that Maserati car. And it must be said, he's done a great job again, hasn't he? He really has. And again, a top 5 finish is solid for that Maserati. The fact he's here today is just a circumstance of everyone else's misfortune. But, you know, overall, Maxi Gunter deserves praise once again. And I'm going to say it again. It's not Gunter's fault and it's not Maserati's fault. What happened? I'm not going to say it anymore to any other drivers, I promise. But Maxi Gunter, you know, drove solidly inside the top 5, got some good solid points and inherited a few more and a bit of bubbly as well due to later disqualifications and penalties. So, yeah, a fantastic effort by Gunter. Again, was in the gaggle but kept himself safe and controlled. He just did a good job, didn't it? It's difficult to talk about these drivers in any other way because they're all in the gaggle, all in the pack at some point. Some fell by the wayside because they had sustained damage and whatnot. But for him personally, again with Maxi Gunter, he did nothing wrong. He drove well, he drove smart, he drove cleverly. This is what we're seeing from Maxi Gunter all season long so far. He's doing a great job. And Maxi Gunter's going to get 9 points for me as well. 9 points to him as well for a superb job. A solid top 5 finish that became a podium. Deserves praising. He did a great job. Maserati again did a great job. He's just really good, isn't he? He is like he finished the last season off with. He started this season really well. Doing a great job. Doing a great job. 9 points to Maxi Gunter. Now, finishing in 4th place, we come to Dan Ticktum in the ERT. Great job by Dan Ticktum. Great job by ERT as well, it must be said. They were really downplaying their efforts going into this weekend, saying, look, it's a high usage track. There's not much chance for lifting and coasting. We've not got a very efficient powertrain, so we're going to struggle. We are going to struggle, we know that. And then they end up finishing 2 cars inside the top 10 this race. Of course, one didn't in the end, which we'll come to in a minute. But yeah, for Dan Ticktum, crossed the line in 5th, I think it was, or 6th, and then, of course, elevated to 4th again. So they deserved this ERT. They really, really did. Even Dan Ticktum was happy with that. He says it's one of my best drives ever in Formula E. But because the gaggle was so slow, they were able to be at the back of the train, like the ERT usually would be anyway, after, where they qualified. But they were quite happy to sit there and just save the energy, because it didn't matter these cars going 4, 5, 6 wide. They could position that car anywhere at the back of the grid and just be like, yeah, we're saving energy. We've got a big hole punched in front of us, and we can lift and coast nice and easily and draft and do whatever we need to do out of trouble. And then they gain the places slowly, slowly, catchy monkey. And Dan Ticktum did a fantastic job. You saw both ERTs at that mid-stage of the race creeping inside the points. And then you realised, oh shit, they've got quite a lot more percentage than everyone else as well. I think Dan Ticktum had 1% more than the cars around him at the time. And Sete Camera had a shitload more. He had like an extra lap to go at. They were both driving so well. So for Dan Ticktum, finishing 4th in the end after crossing the line 6th, I believe it was, is getting a perfect 10 from me. What a stunning drive that was. A great effort. Well deserved. And nice to see Dan actually doing something constructive with the ART squad after so many bad, difficult races. In fact, there's not been one good race from him so far, has there? But this one was one of them. A great finish, 12 points for ERT. That's a massive haul of points. That really, really is. Especially when they're fighting for this 9th in the Constructors. That is a big chunk of points, that. And it's a shame that Sete Camera couldn't keep where he finished, but of course we'll come to that in a minute. Again, another penalty. But yeah, for Dan Ticktum, didn't put a wheel wrong, didn't put a foot wrong. Top 4 finish, stunning effort. 10 points. Next up is Mitch Evans, inheriting a top 5 finish again after the penalties, disqualifications, blah, 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 blah. It's just going to be like that the whole race, I'm afraid. Every single person I'm going to talk to gains a position somewhere. If not 2, if not 3, fuck knows. But yeah, for Mitch Evans, it was okay. It was solid, wasn't it? Not where Jaguar expected to be. We were expecting Jaguar to be up there, away and gone, securing all these brilliant places in the podium spots. Wasn't to be though, was it? It's just not been Evans' season so far, has it? There's just been little mistakes here and there, I mean, don't get me wrong, he's not doing bad, is he? He's not doing anything drastically wrong, but at the same time, he's not doing anything special either. He's just around there picking the points up, and today inheriting a 5th place finish in the end. A top 5 looks good on paper, but he only crossed the line securing a few points, but was elevated substantially. Yeah, overall, a solid weekend for Mitch Evans. I can't really say much more about his race other than in the gaggle, broke free, etc. It's rinse and repeat for every driver, I'm afraid. It really, really is. But for Mitch Evans, it's 7.5 to him for that effort, because it was solid, but nothing special or spectacular like I've talked about the other drivers ahead. I think that's fair for Mitch, I really do. There's not much more to be said about his race weekend other than it was solid and he kept himself out of trouble, while other drivers inside the championship fight did get into trouble. That's all I'm going to say. But yeah, Mitch Evans, 7.5 to him. Then we come to Jean-Eric Vergne, finishing here in 6th position after crossing the line in P3, but a 5-second time penalty for a collision with Nick Cassidy means that he tumbles out of that position and ended up crossing the line 3rd, dropped to 7th, but then reinstated up to 6th because of the disqualification for the leader. Yeah, that 5-second time penalty was incredibly harsh. Very, very harsh indeed. Nick Cassidy tried to go around the outside of 4 cars at the turn 8-9 chicane that was very tight, very difficult, very twisty. And I don't understand how Vergne was expected that all of a sudden there was going to be a Jaguar there when he was looking for the cars around him and behind him. You get into that turn 8-9 chicane, it's quite slow speed, but again quite fast. There's one line through it basically. And, he was taking his ordinary line. All the other 3 cars that were behind him took the same line, okay, no problem, and then all of a sudden you've got Nick Cassidy blasting it around the outside and then trying to basically get to the point of the apex where it's a wall or hit Vergne, and Vergne obviously doesn't see him, makes contact with him, and it breaks Nick Cassidy's front wing. And that's a 5-second time penalty for Jev. I think it's incredibly harsh, that. I really, really do. I think it's unfair on Jev for that one. Yeah, I don't agree with it, to be honest with you. I don't agree with it. I think Jev did everything he could there, and I genuinely don't think he saw Cassidy, and that's not because of Jev's spatial awareness. I just think he wasn't expecting a car to try and overtake 4 cars. You know, at that stage, going into that corner, Nick Cassidy wouldn't even have been in Jev's peripherals because he'd have been behind several of the cars, and then all of a sudden he's there. No, not Jev's fault. Nick Cassidy should put himself in that position, and that's the end of that one. But for Jev, I awarded him a solid 7 for this weekend overall. I think it was good. Maybe harsh by a point there, to be fair. I don't blame him for the collision overall, but again, it's cost him places, but he can't just give positions away. You know, it was more on Cassidy, that, but again, it's not the first bullshit penalty we'll come to this race, and we'll go through them all as in due course. But for now, it's a solid 7 to Jev. Harsh by a point, that I do think, looking back on reflection. But there were so many great drives up and down the field that deserve praising. Was Jev's race okay? Yeah, it was good. You know, that P3 finish that he did cross the line in was solid. Probably harsh by a point. But yeah, for now, Jev, a solid 7. It's just frustrating that the Penske squad, it just never seems to go their way, does it? Then we come to Norman Natto in the Andretti. Yeah, here he is, finishing inside the top 10, which is a good effort. I scored him low because I didn't realise what had actually happened to him until well after I put the scores in and well after Dan had already produced the scoreboard. So I'm reluctant to change it and cause Dan any more hard work. But Norman Natto crossed the line and finished the race with a flat tyre on the front left. And not only was it flat for the last lap, it was flat for the last 7 laps of the race, deflating for the last 11. He got a slow puncture on that tyre, and he elected not to pit because he thought, I can persevere with this, it's understeery, but I'm okay. And I think he did a good job considering. It was a deflating tyre which became fully flat with 7 laps to go, and he managed to keep it inside the top 10. That's fair play, Norman. Fair play to him for that. But again, this proves the bullshittery of the Formula E's consistency with penalties, because Norman Natto has crossed the line there with a flat tyre, right? Bear that in mind, a flat tyre. He's keeping this position. Antonio Felix to Costa last season in London crossed the line with a deflating tyre because it was a slow puncture that he received from picking up debris on the racetrack, and was thrown out because of the tyre pressures were too low. But apparently the FIA and Formula E are saying a flat tyre is different to a deflating tyre. What a load of horseshit. What a load of horseshit. So if Norman Natto had crossed that line, it had got 1 PSI lift in it because it was a deflating tyre, would he have been thrown out then? But because the Costas had, like, I don't get it. I don't get it at all. So yeah, so Norman Natto is allowed to cross the line with a flat tyre, and that's okay. But the Costa with the deflating tyre, due to damage and contact, the same reason that Norman Natto got his flat tyre, not allowed. I don't know. Don't agree with that at all. But again, that's not Norman Natto's fault. Did a great job. Harsh score, really, but I gave him 6.5, not knowing that he was running around with a flat tyre for so long as well. But again, brings into question the FIA's penalties and consistencies. And let's face it again, Da Costa and Porsche went to an FIA tribunal hearing well after the London E-Prix had ended to try and get that P3 reinstated for Da Costa, and it was thrown out. But this is allowed to stand. I'm smelling a big load of bullshit here, and I think another video is going to have to come on Porsche and their unusual penalties that they have faced during their time in Formula E, because it seems to be an ever-growing list, doesn't it? But for now, 6.5 to Norman Natto. A top job with your puncture. Shame I didn't hear about it sooner, is all I'm going to say on that. Then we come to Stoffel Vandor picking up a few points in the other DS Penske car. What could be said, really? I mean, his teammate had a 5-second time penalty and still finished ahead of him. It's frustrating with me, with Vandor, it really is. He's just not getting to grips with his DS Penske at all, is he, unfortunately? So I've given him 4. It's as simple as that, really. I don't want to talk about it too much longer, to be honest with you. It's getting a bit tedious with Vandor at the moment. You know, he needs time to settle into a new team. That was last season's excuses. This season, he's just not matching Jev at all. And it's strange, unusual, it's frustrating to see as well. I really expected more from Vandor, but he just can't seem to get to grips with it, can he? The Gen 3 car he is just struggling with overall. Doesn't matter what team he was with or what car you put him in, he's not doing anything that you'd see of a champion to do, you know. So, yeah, 4 to Vandor, and that's that, really. Then we come to Sacha Fenestraz in the Nissan. Did he actually cross the line inside the points? Or was he awarded points at the end due to the disqualifications and other penalties? Can't remember. I've got to be honest with you, I can't remember. But I think he did scrape 1, didn't he? And then was elevated to 9 to get 2. Wow. Fenestraz overall, he's getting the same as Vandor. It's 4. It's 4 to Fenestraz because his teammates up there doing something mighty. 4 podiums in a row. This is Fenestraz's first point since Diria. Is it? He's not had many, has he? He's not had many points as Fenestraz. I know he's only had 1 point scoring opportunity prior to this one. So, yeah, not done very well as Fenestraz, but at least it's some points, isn't it? But nowhere near on the pace of his teammate. And the wonder kid, the wonder rookie of last season, you know, pole positions are plenty, front row starts, you know, into the duels. He was doing great jobs. Okay, he never always materialised in the race, but what he always used to do in qualifying was solid, and it would often net him a point or 2 in the end. This time around, he's nowhere and struggling to pick up the points, which is a shame, but it's a couple here for him. It's 4 points for me from him, which is okay, you know. Can't say much more than that, can you? But it's nothing special, and his teammate is really taking the reins of Nissan. They need Fenestraz up there to try and take the reins of the team's championship to the rest of the teams as well. But for now, 4 points to Fenestraz. Gets a couple of points in the end, but it should be much more. And the final points paying position goes to Lucas Di Grassi in the Apt Cupra, finally picking up a point in this season. It's been a long time coming. It's been long overdue. What could be said for the Apt squad? Notes like Nico Muller had the pace there to get inside the duels, but then was able to do nothing with it from there. But a strong qualifying performance really puts Muller in a good situation, but lost out in the shuffle of the pack. Di Grassi started lower down the field, but worked his way up. Crossed the line in P11, inherited to P10, so he gets a lucky point in some situations. It's going to be 7.5 from me from Lucas. Didn't do anything wrong this race. You know, just climbed his way up through the field. Was okay. Didn't do anything overly spectacular or special, but gets a point. It's a point at least, isn't it? It's something at last to give a tick to. We're only a few rounds into the season, I suppose, but he finally did it. But yeah, 7.5 to me for Lucas Di Grassi. Solid overall. Got a lucky point in the end. But yeah, did a good job. It was solid. Finishing just outside the points in P11 after crossing the line in P13, because I've started to remember now. I've already got it wrong, haven't I? Lucas Di Grassi actually qualified, actually finished the race in 12th, but then was promoted to 10th because of other penalties. It's bollocks, isn't it? It really is. It's Nico Muller anyway, finishing 11th in the race overall. I'm getting confused myself now. But 11th, just outside the points, is Nico Muller after a good qualifying. A solid top 10 effort. You can't deny that. With qualifying, an Apt Cupra inside the duels is a great effort. I lined up 7th, I think he did, didn't he? And in the early phases of the race was looking strong, was staying in and around that top 10 area. But then just as the pace picked up, he didn't have the efficiency left to go with it. So maybe he spent his energy in the wrong places at the wrong time in the race and ended up tumbling down the field a little bit. Ended up behind his teammate Di Grassi in the end as well. Now, bearing in mind these scores were for the fact that he finished 13th and not crossing the line 11th and then his teammate picking up a point. But even so, I've awarded Nico Muller 8 points this race, and you're going to think, yeah, half a point more, but you know, Di Grassi finished ahead. Yeah, well, you know, from my perspective, these drivers didn't finish inside the points. They inherited the points. Certainly Di Grassi did anyway. And Nico Muller just this weekend overall did a far better job. It was just a shame that he didn't have the efficiency towards the end, but again, that's because he was higher up in the pack and couldn't get as much drafting and as much lift and coasting up front, so tumbled down the order to try and get more, while his teammate was able to progress up and not use as much energy. So, you know, they met in the middle, really, they did. But Nico Muller's been doing a solid job for Apt this season so far. He really has, and deserves those 8 points. It's a shame he didn't get a real point in the championship in the end, but high praise from me once again for Nico Muller for a solid job. And 8 points on the Crawl Room to him. Then we come to Sebastian Buemi. Yeah, Envision. there's not a lot to say about him, is there? It's just frustration after frustration with him. There's no points coming at all from any of them anytime soon. I just don't know what it is. We got to where we were last time, Japan, and Sylvain Felipe was very honest and said this circuit doesn't suit our car. Okay, fair enough, but they might be able to get some. Okay, didn't translate to anything in the race itself, but you'd have thought Misano would have brought something up, and they're like, "Oh no, we're using too much. We're using too much energy here. We're not as efficient as the other cars." Like, well, how? What's happening? Well, why have we got an excuse for every race we go to now? It can't just be the car all the time. You know, these are two solid drivers, or what we thought were highly regarded within the championship in this Envision, and Sebastian Buemi once again outside the points, not delivering anything at all. Yeah. It's a shame. It really is a shame. It's frustrating to see Buemi outside the points once again. Not even in contention for points really at any point during the race. I mean, I'm sure there's some point where you could stop the video on lap 14 or something and go, oh my God, he was fourth. But I think everyone ran first at some point in this race, didn't they? Such was the peloton effect. But yeah, Sebastian Buemi, 3 points from me. Lucky he's getting those, to be honest. It's frustrating to see Envision nowhere near the points anymore now. After a strong start, you know, a couple of podiums back to back for each driver, you think, okay, we just need some consistency to get both cars inside the points, you know. But then they've just both faded away to the point where we've hardly seen any points scored from them since those first couple of rounds. Crazy, crazy stuff. But 3 to Buemi, poor race overall. Then we come to Jake Hughes in the McLaren. What a shame for Jake. Qualified himself in P4, which was a great effort for that McLaren, let's not forget, but then was thrown out and disqualified from qualifying due to his fire extinguisher not being armed and not being active in qualifying, which is a big no-no, it must be said. I don't disagree with the Formula E precedent set for that. You know, you need your fire extinguisher switched on. It's as simple as that. It's a safety feature that needs to be addressed, you know, and the disqualification was right for that because that's a big no-no. That's a silly mistake to make as well, and it should be punished. So I do really, really feel sorry for Jake in that situation. It wasn't his fault. It wasn't his fault at all. He did all he could in qualifying and did a great job doing it. And then, you know, he unfortunately had to start last in the race because of, you know, an unfair penalty on him, let's say, because it wasn't his fault as a driver, but the team has to take the punishment. They have to get thrown out of qualifying, and that's life, unfortunately. So yeah, for Jake Hughes, it's a middle row 5 for me. Did see him on the fringes of the top 10, didn't we, in certain stages, but again, I think he used too much energy coming up through the field that he then had to drastically slow down towards the end and lost out. So shame there for Jake, but yeah, encouraging signs going into tomorrow's race, it must be said. That McLaren looked good in the hands of Jake Hughes, so we'll see how he goes tomorrow. There's always tomorrow, isn't there? That's the thing with the Formula E racing when it's a double-header back-to-back. Hopefully they'll learn to turn the fire extinguisher on as well, and we'll be good to go again. But for now, it's 5 to Jake Hughes. Then we come to Nick De Vries in the Mahindra, and it's just been a duff weekend so far for Mahindra, hasn't it? A lot of mechanical issues with the other car, no apparent pace in the other one of De Vries, so it's just 3 to De Vries. I think Mortara already been in that race, he could have done more with it, but as it was, just nothing again. It's a shame. But here we are, you know, this is just difficult, isn't it? It really, really is. But yeah, 3 for De Vries. He was one of the few drivers we didn't really see at all this race, must be said. Very anonymous, not inside the gaggle, not inside the pack much at all, just in the long line of cars with everyone else. Didn't make progress, didn't fall back either, just stayed sort of where he qualified, and that was that. Yeah, I'm sure De Vries, if he could do more, he would have done a little bit more, but I still don't think points would have been possible, and that's why it's just 3 to De Vries. Then we come to Sergio Sette Camera. Oh, for God's sake. What are we going to do about these power spikes in energy? This is unfortunate, isn't it? This is unfortunate. After crossing the line in 7th place, which would have been elevated to 6th, yeah, that was big points gone missing there for ERT due to a power spike in the attack mode. So basically what happened on Sergio Sette Camera's second attack mode is he ran slightly wide going through the attack mode on the exit of the attack mode, hit a curb, which then caused the rear wheels to spin up, and instead of using the 350 kilowatt hour permitted by the championship in that situation. It spiked at 353, so his wheels were up in the air. He didn't gain that. He wasn't doing 353 kilometres of energy usage. It was in the air, but these power spikes are rules, and before he used to get excluded and disqualified for it. This time he only gets a 50-second time penalty, so that's something, isn't it? He still gets classified as a finisher, but yeah, it's not good, is it? To be fair, we haven't seen much of it this season, if at all. I don't think I can recall it happening this season, to be honest with you, but something needs to be done about this power spike, because the championship even admits it's not an advantage because the wheels are in the air for this to happen. So is there not something that can do when the car gets to 350 and it knows it's like in the air? It can cut the power briefly and then reinstate it so it doesn't spike? I don't know. I don't understand the full regulations and rules and permutations over it. But if you know there's no advantage being gained because he's not actually getting that output of 3 kilowatt hours more for that split second that it does it, because you know the wheels are in the air, then why is it a penalty? You know, I can understand, you know, if you don't penalise something like that, it then could be, you know, tweaked upon that it can gain you a little bit of something. I'm sure there will be teams that would be clever to work that around. But maybe do one warning and then a penalty. Because I don't think... I mean, look how rare it happens, you know. You're doing it once by accident, but then if you do it again, then it's a penalty. That's what I would say, because then you clearly know there's something wrong with the car's software in that situation, and then that needs to be penalised. But yeah, that's what I would do for it, because it costs teams and drivers a lot of points and lot of issues at times, you know. And Sete Camera here today could have had 8 points, but instead he gets nothing for it, and that's a crucial 8 for ERT as well in that battle for 9th in the Constructors. So yeah, they've managed to get a big haul of points today, but who knows what might happen tomorrow, you know. So yeah, for now, I've awarded Sete Camera 9 points. He was beaten by his teammate this weekend, it must be said. He was beaten by his teammate, and yeah, but he still did a great job. He still did a great job and still was inside the points, and that was a fantastic effort. So yeah, Sete Camera for me gets 9 points. Well done to him for a great race. And again, it's a situation that wasn't in his control, wasn't really his issue. Okay, yeah, he ran wide a little bit, but who didn't that race? It was just unlucky that he was the one that spiked in power. One of them things, unfortunately. 9 to Sete Camera. And next up, we come to Pascal Verline. And there we have it, a lottery of the week to Pascal Verline, because unfortunately he just climbed all over the back of Jev, didn't he? And took his own front wing off and had to pit for a new nose, and that was his race ruined. When he was in a good position there to get on the podium easily, maybe even snatch the victory away as well. Yeah, there was a lot more in that race than what this position shows. And unfortunately, it was all Pascal's fault. I know there was bunching within the pack, and I know there was grouping here and there. And you saw some unfortunate situations where people lost bits of the nose and got damage from the bunching effect. But Pascal Verline was just a little bit blind there, wasn't he? And caught the back of, well, he didn't even catch the back. He climbed the back of Jean-Eric Vergne. Jean-Eric Vergne lucky himself not to get a black and orange flag for the rear wing flying about the place. And then eventually his front wing was flying about the place as well, wasn't it? So, yeah. Yeah, shame for Verline. That is a harsh lottery, but I felt he was the most deserving out of everyone this weekend, because there's been a lot of penalties handed out to drivers and things like that, and that didn't seem fair. But Verline was one of the few this race that it was his own fault, let's say like that. So yeah, Pascal Verline, a very harsh, I would admit, not very, but just a harsh, slightly harsh lottery of the week to him, but it was his own doing. Massive championship points lost there, because it was easily a podium finish on the cards there, and at the very least, a top 5. So yeah, minimum 10 points went begging, maximum of 25 points went begging this race. So yeah, it's a lottery of the week to Pascal Verline. Shame to see him down here, but that's life, and I'm sure he'll bounce back again tomorrow. Next up, we come to Robin Freins in the second of the Envisions. My oh my. He had to stop for a wing as well, didn't he, at some point in the race? It gets very wing-related all down here, doesn't it, I think now? It's difficult to work out what happened. I can't remember. But he's down here, well outside the points. It was even a retirement. I've no idea, I can't remember. But yeah, Freins, I've given him... What have I given him? Let's have a look at my scores again. I've given him 2. Freins I've given 2 points to. Yeah, a very, very just race again. Just the Envisions again. what more can I say? What more can I do? Frustrating race. I can't remember if he retired, but either way, he had a pit stop, didn't he? Front wing and tyre he needed, didn't he? After catching the back of someone. But yeah. 2 to Robin Fright's very, very poor race again. Then we come to Jandro Vala in the second of the Maseratis. And again, a race that... difficult, wasn't it? Just difficult. I don't know with Jahan at all, really. It's just not been going his way this season at all, has it? It must be said. It's been a difficult one for him. Yeah. Shame. Just shame all round, isn't it? It really is. It's going to be 3 points to him for that. Yeah, I don't know. I just don't know with Jahan. Did he have a pit stop as well? I think he did, didn't he? I think all these cars that we're coming to now had a pit stop or had some sort of misfortune in the race. Maybe even retired. I can't remember. I just, my mind's gone blank with it all because it was just all that crazy in the end and I'm too busy focused on who had penalties that I forget what happened with other cars. But Jahan, either way, he had a pit stop, then I think he might have retired. I can't remember, but that's... Yeah, 3 to Jahan anyway, and that's that. And then we come to Sam Bird in the second of the McLarens. Oh, God. I mean, he led the way, didn't he? And they were like, this is too soon, this is too soon. He's like, I know. Let me just get out the pack for 5 minutes. It's pissing me off. He was frustrated because he just didn't like the way that people were driving inside that mid-pack. And unfortunately, got caught by someone and sustained a rear puncture once he fell back into the pack again and had to make a pit stop. And then I believe he was a retirement, wasn't he? I think we're coming to the first of the retirements now. A shame for Sam, that. Was the win on the cards? No, absolutely not. He was leading at the wrong time. The team were right. Of course he was. But... he got into the gaggle where he didn't want to be, and then he ended up picking up a puncture because he got hit by someone. I don't know who, but he was clipped, and that took the tyre off the rim, and then that was it. Curtains for his race, really. I'm giving him 4 anyway for Sam Bird. I think I've only given his teammate a middle of the road 5 because of his misfortunes in qualifying. Sam's misfortunes in the race weren't his doing, weren't his fault. Again, with everything that kicked off after the race, top 5 easily for both cars there. Both McLaren should have been inside the top 5 really, but circumstances in qualifying for Jake really put pay to that for him, and in the race for Sam Bird, the contact and the puncture put pay to him for that. So yeah, 4 points to Sam. I think it could have been more this race. Hoping for more tomorrow, of course. We've still got another race tomorrow. The McLarens are looking good. They should both be inside the points tomorrow. I think they should be on the cards for that. Minimum top 6 for both, I would say. Top 6 for both. I'm going to say that they're going to be 5th and 6th, but we'll see how it unfolds. But for now, 4 to Sam Bird. An unfortunate race for Sam. I think he needed a little bit more luck this time. Then we come to Nick Cassidy, who, yes, he caused his own dramas, really, didn't he? Bit of an audacious move and overtake on Nick Cassidy there. Nick Cassidy overtaking, I should say, for Jean-Eric Vergne. Tried to overtake 4 cars in one corner, which, it's always a little bit difficult anyway. But, there's a wall there. And he did catch Jean-Eric Vergne or hit the wall. He had to make that choice. So he chose to hit Jev. It broke his front wing and ruined his race from there. So that's a shame, really. He's avoided a lot just because, I could understand the frustration. And I do also feel a little bit sorry for him for what happened in free practice 2, where... he was on a hot lap and there was 2-3 cars at this last corner that were all on the racing line, and then as Cassidy tried to use the runoff area to avoid, a McLaren, I don't know which one it was, then swerved that way because he was told car on fast lap. So he tried to get off the racing line, not realising that car on the fast lap then had already had to take evasive action for other cars behind. So I don't fully put the blame on that McLaren driver anyway, but that McLaren driver weaving meant that Cassidy had to go off the runoff area onto the grass in a scary accident, hit the wall, and then bounced off that wall and went headlong into the other wall as well. So he was lucky that he was able to get out for qualifying. A big shame really for that. So I do take a bit of sympathy for Cassidy for that and not giving him a lottery. Circumstances beyond his control, absolutely, in that situation. But in the race itself, it was his control. He should have backed out of that. He should have maybe just gone for the 3, tucked in behind Jev. Because he'd already got the 3. He'd got 3 cars. He was comfortable. He could have literally just slotted in behind Jev. No dramas. But he tried to go for Jev as well. So he's avoiding a lottery for what happened to him in free practice 1. But he's only getting 1 point from me. Just the solitary 1 because it was his fault. I do lay blame on him more. He could see where Jev was and still chose to go for a gap that was always going to close. 1 to Cassidy. It's a shame. Big championship protagonist outside the points once again. It's given the advantage to the likes of Ollie Rowland, Max Gunter, Verline down here as well, Jake Dennis up there as well. So it's all to play for. But 2 of the big guns outside the points. Shame. Then we probably come to the unluckiest man so far this weekend. It's Edoardo Mortara. I mean, bloody hell, there was no point in really coming today. He may as well just start again tomorrow if the car decides to work. Missed all of free practice 1 due to a battery issue with the car. Free practice 2 got out there. Qualifying, the battery issues re-emerged apparently, and he was intermittently losing power. But I think he did get a good enough lap in, didn't he? I don't think he lined up last in the race, but nonetheless he still had intermittent issues during qualifying, and then in the race itself he got round turn 1, turn 2 and then stopped. And that was his race over and done with. So not really much could be done for Mortara, it must be said. I've given him 4 out of a maximum of 5. I score retirements just for the fact that I only give his teammate 3 and he finished the race. But I do think, Mortara massively unlucky there. Couldn't show anything that he was capable of, really. There's only free practice 2 we could really use as a reference. That's still not relevant, is it? So qualifying he had intermittent issues, missed FP1 completely, a brand new track, and then in the race itself, got round 2, 3 corners, and then that was it, conked out. End of race. Brilliant. 4 to Mortara. A dismal season he's having, but he's not doing anything wrong, is he? Mortara is doing the best job he can with the car he's got, but this time, couldn't even do that. The car conked out. 4 to Mortara. And last but by no means least, we do of course come to Antonio Felix da Costa, the race winner that was thrown out 6 hours after the checkered flag fell due to an incorrect spring fitted in the throttle pedal area. So it was the retention spring that springs the pedal back after you press it. So you depress the throttle obviously, and then that spring is the one that brings the pedal back up as you lift off. This spring was no longer a controlled part by the Spark engineering team that supply the parts for the Formula E cars in this department. This was a part that was used on Gen 2 era cars and the first season of Gen 3 due to them not being able to supply the whole grid with the upgraded parts for the Gen 3 era. So they allowed the Gen 2 parts to be used in the Gen 3 era for the first season. Of course, then that meant that as this season came, all of these parts were now readily available for all teams to use, so they didn't tell anyone. The FIA nor Spark Racing Technologies informed any of the teams that these were now readily available, and that meant that the Gen 2 specs were no longer able to be used. All they did were update the documents to say that the Gen 3 springs were now available. Didn't say that the Gen 2 ones were now unavailable. Now, I've done more digging into this, and my inside sources tell me that there's not actually any difference in the spring whatsoever from the Gen 2 era into the Gen 3. It was just that the Gen 2 springs were coated. Say, I don't know what they were coated with, but they were, say, like a powder coating, but it wasn't powder coated. Obviously, because that would just be brittle and it would snap the spring. It'd just snap on the spring. But it was coated in some form of, like anti-rust material. They're either normally gold. If you see a gold spring, that means it's coated with something. Basically what happened was the springs for the Gen 3 era weren't going to be coated. They were just going to be the standard silver on a spring. And yes, this spring was going to remain silver because it was going to reduce the environmental impact of producing springs. So we have an identical part on a throttle position that was able to be used last season in the Gen 3 era, and then was then outlawed in the second season of Gen 3, despite the fact it was completely the same. It's just that one was coated and one wasn't. Very, very strange. And then to make things a little bit more interesting, there have been 3 other teams that have now been found that have been in possession of these springs, shall we say. Whether they were fitted onto the car or not, I don't know. I genuinely don't know that. But 3 other teams have been in possession of the old spec springs, and some are believed to have been used during the races this season so far. As for parts supply and things like that, I think it's been guaranteed that all bar one of the teams in the championship actually had them in their spare parts. So, be it back at the factory or somewhere, but basically they found that these springs are fucking everywhere inside the paddock still. Because they were obviously used all last season, and there was no reason to not realise that they weren't able to be used this season. Yeah, so a coated spring, or uncoated spring, is what they should have used, and they had a coated spring. So Da Costa has been thrown out of the race for that. So not only is it not even it's the same spring. It's the same spring. It's fucking balmy, isn't it? It really is. So yeah, this goes into the list of weird penalties that Porsche have received over the years since being in the sport. As already mentioned, with Norman Natto finishing the race with a flat tyre, Da Costa was thrown out of London E-Prix after a podium finish for having a deflating tyre. Mad, isn't it? Mad. It was also found that Verline had the old spec spring as well on his car, because they checked him, but because he didn't finish inside the top three, they couldn't actually disqualify him. So yeah, so both Porsches were running that old spec spring. So Lotterer of the week to Verline, in theory, if he had not took his own wing off, he could have won the race and still ended up at the back anyway, because both cars had the old spec spring in, but it wasn't an old specification, it was just coated. And they need to be non-coated now for environmental reasons. So if you want to answer on a postcard as to why producing more springs that are now susceptible to rust over ones that are already in the paddock in abundance from the Gen 2 era into the Gen 3 era, that most teams have got within their parts supply and stock supply. We believe 3 other teams have already used them this season at some point. Yeah, I don't understand the environmental impact of that at all. Getting rid of springs that are already there produced for new springs. Anyway, load of bollocks, isn't it? Load of bollocks. But Antonio Felix da Costa did nothing wrong this race or this weekend. Did a stunning drive, won the race, hands down won the race. Of course, it's 10 points to him for that. 10 points. Antonio Felix da Costa, a great drive, great race, thoroughly deserved it. And I think I'm going to do another video based on the unusual penalties that Porsche have received during their time in Formula E, because I think it'd be an interesting one to find out what other teams have gotten away with. I know there was one with the team's transponders, wasn't there? Was that by Techeetah back in the day, wasn't it? And they only had their car sent to the back of the grid or made to do a pit lane start or something when they should have been thrown out of the championship. So yeah, I might go into that, might do a different video on that. But for now, it's 10 points to Da Costa, and that's the end of that race. So there we have it then, guys. Those were the runners and riders of the Misano E-Prix round number 1. Let me know your thoughts and feedback down below. Did I score any drivers too high, any too low? The updated standings with the scores I've just awarded are on the screen now for you to take a look at. Have a look and see where your favourite driver is now after what was an up and down race weekend by so many teams and so many drivers. There was a lot of penalties dished out after the race, a couple of penalties dished out during, a disqualification from qualifying. It was a very messy, typical Formula E race in that sense, wasn't it? We're used to seeing silly penalties like this dished out back in the Gen 1 and early Gen 2 era, but it's set to calm down. But it's not calmed down at Misano, has it? It's come back with fighting force and the bullshit continues. Very, very strange indeed. But one thing's for certain, Da Costa is my race winner overall, and he gets a perfect 10 for him for that, because it was a great drive after all the press in the media and everything like that, everything that he's been going through behind the scenes at Porsche. He even said on the team radio after the checkered flag, didn't he? Stay with me, guys, stay with me. And it's a shame that he has to now lose out on that victory due to no fault of his own, really. Just general Formula E bullshittery. Thanks as always goes out to Dan Bartlett, of course, formerly of Mushy Gaming, for providing me with the scoreboard that you see on your screen. Without him, this series would be more pointless than it already is. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. I will see you all again tomorrow for round number 2 at the Misano E-Prix, so be sure to tune in for that one as well. Looking forward to seeing your reactions and comments below as well, based on what you thought of this race, the penalties dished out, which ones you felt were fair and unfair. There's a lot to unravel during this race, and it wasn't just the racing, was it? Thanks a lot for watching, guys, and as always, much love.